Welcome to Submain-hosted webcast implementing Microsoft Design Guidelines with CodeIt.Right. My name is Serge Baranovsky, Principal with Submain, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Before we get started, I wanted to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. First, you have the option to connect using voice over IP or by phone. All attendee lines are automatically muted to ensure that everybody watching gets the best audio quality possible. Next, everyone is welcome to ask questions using the Ask a Question button in the top left part of your screen. We will address as many questions as possible at the end of the webcast. And if we don't get your question answered, we will follow up with you after the event. Finally, we are recording today, and we will send out a link to the recording to everyone within a few days. Our guest presenter today, David McCarter, Microsoft MVP. David has been presenting on coding guidelines for over 9 years now at numerous conferences and events. So with that, I will hand this over to David.
Welcome everybody. So I'm David McCarter. My email address is up at the top there if you want to shoot me an email after the webcast. I'm a C# Microsoft MVP. I've been an MVP since 2005. I'm a developer, architect, consultant, and professional code reviewer. And I also go all over the country speaking at conferences about coding standards and the subject we're talking about today. So check my website, .it.com, and you can find out where I'm speaking next. I also have a coding standards book out since 2005, Dave McCarter's .NET Coding Standards, which I hope you guys will check out and maybe use at your company. I also have a website, .NETtips.com. I mentioned that just a second ago. It's been around since '94, one way or the other. Hope you guys will check it out. I also have an open source project, which follows a lot of these guidelines that we're talking about today. And about a week and a half ago, I released my first Rock Your Technical Interview Working with Recruiters book. So you're looking for a job where you want a big raise, you need to get a different job, and check out that book. All that can be found on my website. So the first section we're going to talk about today is why do we need coding standards? And hopefully most of you are here because you either use coding standards or you want to maybe implement them at your company. There's lots of benefits using coding standards. Usually when I talk about this at conferences, I ask how many people have taken over somebody else's code. Everybody raises their hand, of course. And then I ask how many people enjoyed that experience. Everybody's hand goes down. So hopefully, if you do coding standards, it won't be a bad experience if you take over somebody else's code, especially using the Microsoft guidelines. So some of the benefits are code clarity, easy to understand. If we all code similarly, then we can easily look at other people's code and know exactly what it's doing. Easier to maintain. I don't think there's any code that you write once and you never fix. So we need to do coding standards to make it easy to maintain. Reduce bugs, of course. We don't want bugs getting into production. And if we use coding standards in the beginning, there'll be a lot less few bugs, I guarantee you. Simplified code reviews. So if you're doing code reviews at your company to make sure people are doing standards, then that's a great benefit too. Shorter learning curve for newer team members. That's a big one. You don't want to take months and months for people to understand your code, especially if you hire junior programmers. Consistent among teams. So if your whole company or multiple teams use the same coding standards, it's easy to share code. Our last company, we had many teams, so it was very important to do coding standards. Comply with internal or regulatory bodies. So I've had to deal with that before, and it's a little bit more work to make sure you're doing that. And of course, hopefully in the end, produces more stable, reliable code. One of the other things I ask in coding in my conference talks is how many people like to be contacted by QA. Nobody's hand goes up. So if we're doing these things we're going to talk about today, hopefully you'll get very few bug reports from your QA staff. Of course, there's always a business benefit, and these are the things that I usually like to have managers involved in. Improved software quality, of course. We want to produce the best quality software we can and not have bugs and unhappy customers. Accelerate time to market. Of course, your managers and PMs like that, you don't want to take 6 months to get a feature into the market. Enhance customer satisfaction. Of course, you always want to make your customers happy. They're the ones paying for your software. Even if it's internal, if you're just doing internal software, it's basically the same thing. Reduce long-term costs. Another business benefit. You don't want, the cost of fixing a bug after it goes out into the public is about 150 times more than if you found it during design. And improve productivity, of course. We want more features, less time trying to maintain code. So why do coding standards fail? Those of you who already have coding standards, you might have ideas, you might have comments about this, and you're more than welcome to make them in the comment section. We can talk about it at the end of the webcast. But the survey that Submain has done has found that developers keep forgetting to abide by the guidelines, and I definitely think that's true. At my last company, my book was the coding standards, and I would go around and people had it buried in their desk, and that's not a good thing. So when you're implementing coding standards, we talked about this at the first webcast we did called Coding Standards in the Real World. There's a link at the bottom. You guys can check that out. It's free. You need to get the business owner's buy-in. Coding standards aren't going to fly if you can't get the managers and the PMs buy-in to, and the company on why you need to do that. And then you need to get initial consensus of what everybody likes for the coding standards. You can choose a base coding standard to follow. There's many coding standards out there, and it's good to find one that you like and then modify it for your team. And when you're modifying it, of course, make sure you prioritize which are the most important to work on. Implementing code reviews, coding standards, I guarantee you aren't going to be followed probably unless you make sure they're being followed by code reviews. I also think we're going to talk about CodeIt.Right, but I also talk in my conference talks that not only do you need to do coding reviews, but you need to run static analysis like CodeIt.Right during the build process to make sure, especially if you're using contractors. You can use code generation to help out with your coding standards. And of course, review status, give feedback. Coding standards is a living document. It will change all the time, and just make sure that all the team members get the latest version, of course. And again, check out the first webcast we did on this, Coding Standards in the Real World, after this webcast, of course. So, this webcast, we're talking about the Microsoft Design Guidelines and also how CodeIt.Right will help you with these guidelines. So the guidelines are for designing libraries for the .NET framework. And most of the things I'm going to be talking about today are about your DLLs. Most of your code should not be in the application. This is one of the biggest things I see developers do, especially in ASP.NET web applications. They put all the code in the web app, and then if you need to use it in some other app, then it's not going to work. It's going to be a lot of work to yank it out and put it into DLL. So you just should do that in the beginning. And the design guidelines for Microsoft are really geared towards these reusable DLLs. It's the most popular coding standards among developers, and it's not just for framework and libraries. It's for applications too, but most of it applies to your DLLs. And this is actually what Microsoft uses internally for the .NET framework. And if you've looked at the Microsoft Design Guidelines and then looked at the Microsoft framework, via decompiler, you can see they use these exact guidelines. They always have since version 1. And the guidelines are organized into different categories of what you should do, what you should consider, what to avoid, and then, of course, what do not do when you're designing your DLL libraries. So there's a bunch of different categories. We're going to go over each of these categories. The first one is naming guidelines. And then we have type design, how you design your types. Member design guidelines, talking about methods, properties, constructors, things like that. I'll be showing you some examples of that. Designing for extensibility, I've got one demo to show you on that. Subclassing, events, virtual members, things like that. Then we have design guidelines for exceptions, designing, throwing, catching exceptions. This is another area that I see a lot of, it's pretty weak in applications. I actually looked at a method about 2 days ago that was 1,100 lines of code in one method and absolutely no exception handling at all. Then we have usage guidelines, common types raised, and then we have design patterns, which I'm going to be showing you a cool demo towards the end of the webcast on a really cool design pattern that a lot of us use and probably don't implement correctly. So what is CodeIt.Right? That's why we're here. Well, besides the guidelines, we're here to talk about CodeIt.Right also. It's an automated way to ensure your code adheres to the guidelines. And the really great thing about CodeIt.Right is that it's very, very configurable. You can use the Microsoft built-in design guidelines. I'm going to show you that really quickly in the first demo. But you can define your own too, and you can create your own. It's a static code analysis and metrics, which means you don't have to build your code to run and find issues, which I think is a great thing. You can find it before the build, before you build your code. It's automatic safe refactoring. The cool thing about CodeIt.Right is that not only does it find about 300 of the design guideline rules, but most of it will refactor for you. Just press a button, I'll show you that, and it will write the code correctly for you. And it helps with automated, well, it does automated code review process. One of the newer features that I really like in CodeIt.Right is this code review. And so you can actually, while you're coding, you can actually, CodeIt.Right will show you what the issues are. So it's a lot easier and faster to fix them then. And so on-demand analysis, source control. You can also do source control check-in policy with CodeIt.Right. And I mentioned before, it should be, you should put this in your build process. And essentially, if it doesn't pass some minimum guidelines, you shouldn't put the code into QA. There's hundreds. There's also almost 300 rules: security, performance, usage, maintainability, exception handling, globalization, async, and lots of other things that we'll be talking a little bit about today. And also, if you hook it up to StyleCop, I hope everybody's using StyleCop. If you're using C#, then you have another about 300 rules that is going to check while you're coding and during the analysis process. So let's talk about the design guidelines. We're going to go into each category. I'm going to show you some demos and some sample code. So the first one is always naming guidelines. If we don't name things properly, easy to understand, then it just makes the maintainability of your applications just that much worse. I could talk hours and hours and hours and hours on naming guidelines, but I only picked out a few that I wanted to talk about really quick, and then I'm going to show you a quick demo. So capitalization, there's basically just two capitalization rules for most of the time. Pascal casing used on public member types and namespaces. You should always do that. And then camel casing for parameter names. So all parameter names should be camel cased. And I also, my variables inside my methods, I use camel-cation too. For your field names, fields are the variables you put at the top of your class. You should use underscore, not the M underscore that a lot of people are used to from the past. Just use underscore. And then one of the great things about the underscore is that when you're using IntelliSense and you just press underscore, then boom, all your private fields will come up. And it's really easy to use that way. The other one I picked out was namespaces and assemblies. This is exactly the way I name my namespaces and assemblies. It should be company, then product and or technology, the feature, and then some sub namespaces. And this is exactly what Microsoft follows. So I found one of the namespaces in Microsoft, Microsoft Advertising, which is one of the newer ones for mobile, .mobile.ui. This is exactly what they follow the same rules. And I also name all my assemblies the base namespace, so it's easy to find. I picked out a namespace in my open source project, .NET6.utility. It's .portable, which is one of the new features I'm working on, .windows.extensions. So as you can see, I follow the same guidelines as Microsoft does. The other thing is spelling. Don't forget about spelling. Once you put an incorrectly spelled property name or method or something like that in production, then of course it's going to be hard to fix later. And I don't think I've met one programmer that could spell very well. So we need to do spelling. So the first demo I'm going to show you is actually on spelling. So I'm going to show you CodeIt.Right. Here is my Visual Studio that I hope everybody can see. And I have CodeIt.Right running, and these are the default guidelines that my CodeIt.Right comes up with. This is the Microsoft guidelines. And these are the almost 300 rules that come out of the box with CodeIt.Right. But I have made my own profiles for this, and I have one just for spelling. So this is my spelling profile that I'm going to use this with. And to run CodeIt.Right, there's a couple ways. The first one I'm going to show you is just start the analysis here. So I'm going to run that, and it's going to tell me my identifier should be spelled correctly. It's found a couple things. So let's talk about this one first. So I have a property name that CodeIt.Right found that isn't spelled correctly. And if I click on it, it will go to it, and you can see I typed a T at the end of this, which really should be just name. So there's a couple of ways you can fix this. I can just fix it by doing that, but let's go back to CodeIt.Right. And over here, let me make this a little bigger. Over here, it says add it to the dictionary. Well, this is not spelled correctly. I don't want to add it to the dictionary. So I'm going to rename it. I'm going to tell it what the name is. I'm just going to do name, press that, and press rename to name, and do the checkbox to correct. And if I go back to it now, then CodeIt.Right fixed it, renamed it for me. So it's very easy to do from CodeIt.Right, one way or the other. I want to end let's show you the other one really quick, is collection classes should have a collection suffix. So if I go here, and I have a collection class here that I just did for demo purposes, and it's called DB, actually this is actually some real code I found, DB connection settings. And you can see that's what it picked up here. You can go back here. This is also the instant code review that CodeIt.Right comes with. So I don't even have to run the analysis. It will tell me right here what I need to do. So it's telling me rename to DB connection settings collection. So if I just click that, boom, it's refactored it for you. And you can't see it in this demo, but the other thing is it will rename it correctly and then change all the other code that uses this class too instantly. So you don't have to go through and fix anything. It's very, very easy to use. And the other one was field identifier should be cased correctly. I'm going to kind of not go over this just for time purposes. The other thing I want to show you is I made the spelling profile, and it's very easy to do to create different profiles with the profile editor. And you can see for spelling and my selected roles, these are what I checked that I have for spelling, naming, and spelling. So this is where you create your custom profiles, edit profiles, create new rules. All that is right through the profile editor, and it's very, very easy. But we're not going to go over that during this webcast. Okay, so naming. Next is type design guidelines. I actually found some code the other day that they were using the wrong type, type for enumerations. You really should just leave enumerations at N32. If you start making it smaller sizes, then how about if you run out of that size someday? So just leave it in N32. I've never run out of anything within 32, unless maybe, of course, it has to go in a database as a smaller type size. The other thing that I don't see a lot of people doing is the zero value, which is always the first element if you don't number them yourself, should always be the not chosen value. So in this one, this is real, work item status, undetermined, aborted, completed, executing, queued. So undetermined should be 0 because that means it wasn't selected. And other enumerations, I put none or something like that, which just means the user hasn't selected anything. If you don't do that with the 0 value, then you really don't know what if the user has even selected anything. So make sure you do that for your enumerations. So member design guidelines. So do not call code from constructors. I see this all the time. If you call code from constructors and that code causes an exception, it's hard to deal with. And there's really no reason to, in my mind. So in this example, you can see I have this is a real example file cache, and in the constructor here, we're creating a cache directory that's used somewhere else in the code, and we're going to get the environment special folder application data. The problem with this is that can cause a security exception. I know we all run our programs as developers as admin, but if someone else runs this and they're not running as admin or some other security, this can definitely blow up on you. So you don't want to do things like this. The second problem is directory exists. You don't want to be creating directories in constructors either because, again, it can cause an exception if they don't have access to create that directory and then blow up during the initialization of your type, and you really don't want to do that. So move this code somewhere else in your class and use it when you actually need that directory. So the only thing you should be doing from constructors is setting parameters. That's the only thing because that won't blow up on you. So I rewrote this class file cache, and you can see here I have a public property file path. And in my constructor, all I'm doing is setting the path. And that's all should be done. When I need to create that directory somewhere else, then I need to do it somewhere else, but not in the constructor. So designing for extensibility, hopefully we're all practicing object-oriented programming. And one of the guidelines is you shouldn't really seal really seal classes unless you really need to. So so you should only seal them unless they're a static class, they store sensitive data, they have lots of inherited virtual members. So usually you should just leave your classes not sealed, because if you seal them, they can't be used for inheritance. Sometimes you do seal them for attributes because actually sealing a class is a little bit of a performance gain. So sometimes we do that for attributes. And also don't declare protected members for sealed classes, because if you seal them, they're not for inheritance, then there's no point in doing protected methods anyway. And I'm going to show you that real quick. So if I change over here to type design, or I'm sorry, sealed classes, and run this, you can see I have a problem here. Do not declare protected members and sealed classes that CodeIt.Right finds for you. So if you coded that, again, you can go there. I can fix it. I can go back here, and I can just press correct. And if I go back, you can see what it just took the, is it supposed to take the protected off? Still says, oh, it took protected off the class itself. So now the class isn't sealed anymore. Sorry about that. I got it backwards. So let's seal classes, and there's lots of rules for extensibility. Make sure you check that out a lot, because it deals a lot with object-oriented programming. Exceptions. So one of the big things, I have a new talk I'm doing at the end of the month called Defensive Programming here in San Diego. And one of the things you really, really want to do is not cause exceptions, of course, in your application for lots of reasons, which we don't have time to get into today. But one of the newer features in .NET is they've added try parse to all the value types in .NET. So before we did other things to make sure that a date is correct or a number is correct and things like that. Don't do that, because that can cause an exception. Use try parse now, because try parse will not cause an exception if the data is not correct. And this is actually the proper way to use try parse. You set up a variable for the result to go into at the top here. You can see I have date value. And then I do a try parse on this date here, and it will put it into the date value. If it's successful, the try parse always returns a Boolean true or false if it was successful. So if it's true, then we write out the date value. If it's false, of course, it wasn't able to process, and we write out unable to process parse string. So make sure you use try parse on all value types, and this will cause a lot less exceptions. Another thing, when you're creating types, especially user-defined types, a lot of people miss making sure that you do the equals and the hashtag for your type. So here I have a class point. I have some protected XYs. I'm setting those here in the constructor. But the big thing we want to talk about is if you create a type, a value type like this, then you also need to override the equals and write your code to make sure you have a value, and then you can write custom code to make sure it equals the object that's coming in there. And this is really important, especially if you want to do something different. If you don't override equals, then what will happen is that equals will still be called, but it will actually be run through the inheriting type object, which uses reflection, which actually is a performance degradation. So you want to do this yourself, mostly for performance reasons. And any custom verification you want to do. Same thing with hashtag. They're returning our own hashtag for X and Y. And again, this is performance. And CodeIt.Right will help you find these things. So if I go back to my project, and I go back to type design and run it, then here I have the equals operator and value types. I can go here, and this is my value type, my user-defined type info data. So I'm going to show you right from here. We're going to fix it. And if I just click on, this is the instant code review in CodeIt.Right. If I just click on it, then it writes the methods for me, and then I just put in my code. It's really easy to do with CodeIt.Right. And also I could do it from here too, but I wanted to show you the cool instant code review that's in CodeIt.Right. So there's some design patterns we're going to be talking about today. The biggest offender, something I see in code all the time when I'm reviewing code, is people properly not calling dispose on types or objects that implement iDisposable. So the SQL data reader, this is real code that I found in, a while ago. The people weren't doing this correctly. The proper way to implement iDispose now is just using the using pattern in C# and VB. So if you do using a SQL data reader, it'll create your new data reader, and then you can nest them too, which is great. And then we're creating a connection. This is very common stuff that people do. And we're creating another connection. And then when we get down to right here, then dispose will be called on this connection. When we get down to this and the coding block, then dispose will be called on this. And then we get here, dispose will be called on this. Everything's cleaned up properly. And what happens really when your C# or VB.NET compiler compiles this code, it just compiles it into try find these, which is actually what we did before we had the using pattern in .NET. So make sure you're doing this. And if you're not sure if an object implements iDisposable, what I usually tell my students is, as soon as you're done with it, do .d and see if dispose comes up. But everybody makes mistakes. So the great thing is CodeIt.Right will find that for you. So if I go to my profile, finding dispose issues, and run my analysis, then here I have a type that has some managed resources that need to be disposed. So we're going to come back to that in just a sec, because that's part of the second thing on disposable here. So let's talk about that. So if you inherit or have values inside of your class that are disposable, you need to implement the iDisposable interface. And this is actually the proper way to do this. So when the programmer calls dispose, we're going to run through the dispose. We're going to run through the dispose method down here. We're going to clean up our resources here, and then we'll come back up here, and then it's going to do GC suppress finalize. What this does is it tells the garbage collector that don't call the finalizer down here during the garbage collection process. The reason that this is important, sorry, I'm scribbling all over the screen. The reason that this is important is that if you don't do this, then it will actually, your object won't be cleaned out of memory until 2 garbage collection rounds. And who knows when that will happen. So your data could actually live in memory for a really long time, and I've seen this happen before. So make sure you properly implement this pattern. It's very, very, very important. And also don't forget to implement it. So that's actually one of the things that CodeIt.Right really helps you with, and that's what it found during this, is that I have a type in here that needs to be disposed. So if I go back to there, go here, see I have a pointer here that is disposable, and I need to dispose of it. So again, I can just go here, it's checked to correct it. I can correct it like that. If I go back, we'll be able to see all the code it wrote properly, actually. So first off, we're implementing the iDisposable right here. Then we're implementing the dispose method, which is this is what developers call. And then if there's nothing to do, we just return. And here is where you need to release your objects set dispose to true. Here's the other dispose method that we were talking about before, where the GC suppress finalize is. And then there's the destructor, just in case. The reason we still need constructors is that if the developer didn't call dispose, then the garbage collector needs to destruct this properly. So then we're calling dispose down here. So here's all the code that you need to write when you're implementing. When you have a type here that needs to be disposed, or you're inheriting a type that needs to be disposed. So it's not a ton of code, but CodeIt.Right makes it really, really easy for just to write the code for you. So I really, really like that because even I miss things once in a while. So we have a couple notes here for VB.NET developers. I'm not sure how many we have online. One of the things I always tell my students and in conference talks is make sure you enable option strict. This ensures that the object checking is just like it is in C#. It means you can't do widening. You can't widen your object into a different type without doing it really purposely. Stop using go-to statements. I know we have go-to statements in VB forever, but stop using them. It's not really part of .NET, and especially you can't really do it anywhere else in .NET. The one thing I really do like about VB.NET is these exit statements. So we have exit do and while and for and sub and function. And here's an example over here where, you know, if the number's 100, then we exit do, and we'll go back up to here and then start processing down here. So I really like this in VB. It's easier to break out of statements like this, especially loop statements. The other one, which is actually not only for VB developers, is if you have a lot of if statements like this, you really should think about just doing it in a case. Case is easier to read. There's lots of cool things you can do with cases. And the other thing with casing is it's actually, you know, it has to go down the tree every time it's trying to find something. So if you have a case that you think will be used more, you should put that at the top so it's hit faster. It's a little performance thing. So we got a couple refactoring patterns we're going to talk about, and how CodeIt.Right will help you with these patterns. And I have a really cool demo to show you. So the first one is serialization. I don't know about you, but you know, well, forever really, and even more now, we serialize our objects. And serializing your objects is basically just taking the state of the object, saving it to disk, sending it to another method, to a stream, sending it across the wire to web services, things like that. We're always serializing things nowadays, our business objects, all the time. But doing it properly is not as easy as you might think, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. So any class that might be serialized must be marked with a serialized attribute, and I'm going to show you that. This just tells you know, the .NET that this is going to be serialized, and it helps with the serialization process. There's also some other things. We need to implement the get data, object data, which I'm going to show you this. And there's actually a lot more to serialization I could talk about probably on 3 or 4 slides. But instead of doing all that, I'm going to just show you the demo, which is really cool. I'm going to go to my other instance of Visual Basic here. So, I'm sorry, not Visual Basic, but Visual Studio. So here's a typical a class design. We have a person class here with contact info, email, first name, last name, middle name. We can put lots more in there, but we didn't for the demo. We have a constructor. This is VB.NET. And then we have an event when the contact information is changed. Can be used in lots of ways, especially in UI if you're using WPF and things like that. And then employee inherits from person and adds the salary property. We also have some contact information over here as a class that has address and city and phone number, state and zip, so you can reuse it all over the place. And if we go to the person class, you can see the implementation here. We have our private fields, which is the proper way to do this. We have our event handler, and then we have our properties down here. And then we have our constructor here, which you can send in some data and all of that, and automatically set the property values. So this is a typical class that a lot of people would serialize. And we did put the serializable attribute at the top, which I would think that most people would just do that. But unfortunately, that's not all you need to do, and I'm going to show you. So if I run this, it'll actually serialize fine, but watch what happens. So I got an error. So serializing employees to disk, it worked fine actually, but during the deserialization process, it encountered an end of stream before parsing was complete. And that's the only message you're going to get. And what does that mean? Well, I would have to spend probably half an hour researching what the heck this thing means and try to fix it. But the whole purpose we're kind of here today is to talk about how CodeIt.Right is going to help me with this. So I have a custom serialization profile that I created for this demo. I'm just going to start the analysis process by pressing Start Analysis. And it found 2 issues with this, and that's why it's not deserializing correctly. So mark all non-serializable fields with non-serialized attribute. If we look at that, this is what it's talking about right here. So I can add the non-serialized attribute right there, and it will satisfy that condition. And then if I go back up, it says also implement unserializable for classes that expose events. This is very important if you have events in your class. So for this demo, I'm just going to press correct here. And if we go back to it, you can see down here, it implemented iSerializable, and then the proper methods down here that you need to do for iSerializable, which is a new constructor here that takes the serialization info and streaming context and sets the variables through that. And then also, when you're saving it, get object data, and you're setting the variables down here. So the cool thing with CodeIt.Right is that it wrote all this code for you. And I know we only have a handful of properties here, but if you had a lot of properties in here, CodeIt.Right is really saving you a lot of time by automatically doing this for you. So let's run it again. Oops, sorry, I wanted to run it. And it still didn't deserialize correctly. Why? Well, we didn't do anything with employee. So at least this error is actually telling you something decent. And so here we have employee didn't deserialize correctly. I ran this already, I wasn't supposed to. And so there's 2 things we need to do here. Is we need to add an implement serialization constructor on employee. So let's do that. I'm just going to press correct. It'll write the code. I'll go back there in a second. And then we need to implement iSerializable correctly too. I'm going to correct that. So now if we go back again, it put in the serialization up here, and then it also did the get object data like it did in the person class too. So now it wrote all the code for you to serialize this and deserialize it correctly. So now if I run it again, then everything's great. We serialized it and we deserialized it properly, and we didn't have any exceptions. Yay! The other thing I want to, because we don't have enough time to do a full-blown demo on this, I'm going to show you maybe something what would happen. Let's go back to the person class really quick. So if you added some properties, then you have to remember to add them down here. So I'm going to just kind of fake it by taking these out right there. I'm just faking adding new properties because we don't have enough time to do it by hand. And now, if you added new properties, you need to add them down here. And are you going to remember? Well, hopefully you do. But the cool thing with CodeIt.Right, it's going to tell you. So again, it comes up with these violations that some of the properties weren't in those methods properly. So I can press correct. If I go back here, you can see that it added back those properties into these methods properly. So that's how CodeIt.Right will help you when you're serializing your objects, which we do a lot nowadays. So as you can see in this demo, that CodeIt.Right fixed all these things very, very quickly for you, and you can move on and write some more code, which is a lot more fun than that. So asynchronous programming, I don't know how many people have gotten into the new async in .NET, but it's unfortunately it's better than multi-threading was done before, but there's a lot of traps with async programming. Also, with the new async programming, we've kind of changed the model. So instead of doing event-based patterns, which we did before in .NET, doing multi-threading, things like that, everything has changed really into task-based async patterns. And so we need to start using TAP, not EAP. And there's lots of things with async. Don't create async submethods. Always use await if you're calling an API that returns a task. Async methods need to be named correctly, of course, with the suffix of async. Async method contains only one operator. We need to do some work with that. And still, even though it's better in .NET, and it's going to get better in coming versions of .NET, it's still a really, really easy way to shoot yourself in the foot using async programming. I've seen projects stall and not be able to get out the door for months because they didn't implement this correctly. So the great thing is that all these async issues, CodeIt.Right will find, and not only find, we don't have time today to show you, but not only find, but fix it for you. We only have about 10 minutes left, and we want to have time for questions. So again, there's lots of things with async you need to worry about. Task, outref parameters, calling the start, yields, waits, all kinds of things. And can you remember all this? I certainly can't. But all these rules are built in CodeIt.Right, so it will find these for you and then fix them to refactor and fix them for you. The other big thing is ASP.NET security. I think every week we're hearing about security issues with websites, which I've always seen. And you know, the more we go down the road, the more things we need to worry about with security. So there's actually more than 54 things you need to worry about with ASP.NET security. We don't have time to really talk about any of them today, but the point is that all these security problems, CodeIt.Right will find for you and fix for you. So there's over 54, and of course, I said at the beginning of the webcast, you can write your own too if you have custom security you need to do in ASP.NET. So we're almost at the end here. We're going to have some time for questions. So CodeIt.Right benefits improve the quality of your source code. This is completely true. I've been using CodeIt.Right for years and years and years, and you know, I never ever check in code until I run it through CodeIt.Right first. And this is one of the things I talk about in the coding standards talk at conferences. I have 3 things I do before I check in any code, and that's why all my code hardly get calls from QA. Of course, we need to comply with internal regulatory bodies that decreased cost code reviews. I don't know about you, but most teams I'm on, coding always takes longer, and what gets knocked out quick? What gets knocked off the scheduled code reviews and QA, unfortunately. And I reduce time, QA testing, things like that. Again, QA is usually squashed down to a minimum, and we don't want to, you know, have any issues. And then code quality and solutions. So we're at our Q&A section now. We have our, you can email CodeIt.Right there. I'll also put my email address again if you want to shoot me an email. I do consulting, so you can email me if you need some, if you need a professional code reviewer. I'm really good at that. So Dave@live.com.
David, I wanted to thank you for the presentation, and a quick reminder that if you would like to ask a question, you can do this using the Ask Question button in the top left part of your screen. And I'll mention as well, if you have any feedback on this webcast, or if you have ideas for future webcasts, feel free to type those in the questions window as well. General theme within the comments is that some people disagree with some of the guidelines. For example, here most common is disagree with using underscore for member variables and some others. I wanted to comment, and I will let David comment too, that the guidelines are not dogma. There are 2 parts to them. best practices and recommendations. The best practices is something that makes sense to follow, while the recommendations, you can take them into consideration or not. It is up to you and your team. Most important is to agree on a specific set of standards and go with them. And a good reason to stick with Microsoft guidelines, including the underscore, it is really a really great area. The good reason to stick close to Microsoft guidelines is that they're most popular standard out there in the managed world, and it makes it easier for new team members to get onboarded. With that, I'll let David comment on that too.
This is actually something a lot of people bring up in my conference talks too, is they don't agree with that either. Just my suggestion is just use it for a while, and you're going to like it because it really goes well with IntelliSense. Again, Serge is right. Even these are guidelines. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but also most code that you see online follows these guidelines and in books and things like that. So it's might think about doing it. So.
The next question is a very quick question. Alan is asking that, please confirm, well, the examples were in C# VB is exactly the same. Yes, on the most part, there are some guidelines that will be specific, and you asked the question pretty early in the webcast, but you've seen during the webcast, the product handles both C# and VB, and we had one VB demo there, and there's some VB-specific guidelines that don't apply to C#, but the majority of C# guidelines apply to VB. Another question is from Bill Walter. Should you refactor existing code to apply coding standards, and if so, when and how much refactoring is enough? David, do you want to take this one?
Well, the answer is yes, and even though the answer is yes, then there's also a business sense too, where you just can't stop and refactor everything. So what I usually say is, when you're going through the code, fixing issues or adding new features, start refactoring it to the coding standards. And when you have some downtime, me personally, there's usually some downtime right after it goes to the final QA, and sometimes that's when I go and refactor the code. But yes, you should do it.
And we actually have an ebook coming up and the webcast closer to the end of summer, how to use code analysis and code review for legacy code. And we outlined 3 scenarios there when you only maintain the code and you don't make any major changes, and then you maintain the code and make fixes, and you are trying to use code analysis tool or introduce coding standards in the middle of your project. We will let you know when it's ready, and I'm sure you will find it useful. One more question here from Jeff. Is CodeIt.Right a competing product to ReSharper? I'll let David comment on that in a little bit. It is not. ReSharper does a little bit of code analysis, but CodeIt.Right is really automated code review and code analysis tool that integrates into our build process and also does some just serious analysis, not just high-level analysis. It is pretty common for developers to think they're similar, but there are actually 2 very different products. If you want to add, David.
Sure. Yes. Developers, when I talk about this in conference talks, people will ask me the exact same question because, during the demo I used the word refactoring. So, CodeIt.Right, you're refactoring, as part of the analysis process, whereas, using ReSharper or CodeRush from DevExpress is actually while you're coding, even though CodeIt.Right will find things now while you're coding, but they're definitely different products.
There's another question. Does CodeIt.Right support continuous integration and automated build? CodeIt.Right does continuous integration and can be part of your automated build. It comes with a command line version. It comes with MS Build and end task. We have tutorials how to integrate it into TeamCity cruise control, also how to integrate it into Jenkins. We have a Java plugin for Jenkins. It can be also, obviously using the command line interface can be integrated into Sonar and Jira. The follow-up question was whether we have plans to support C, C++, or even Python. Currently, we do not have plans to support unmanaged languages like C, C++, and we don't have. If we hear from you that you want that support, we will look into that. I can tell you that right now we are adding a JavaScript. This summer we will add in JavaScript as supported languages. So we will provide a complete ASP.NET experience, C#, VB, and JavaScript. And another comment, quite important to support JavaScript and PHP. We are adding JavaScript this summer. I'm sorry, we are a couple of minutes over our time, so if you don't mind, I'll just zoom through a couple of more questions. Mark Walsh is asking, will all this CodeIt.Right code base be rewritten in Roslyn, for Roslyn? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that there will be a version of CodeIt.Right that leverage of the Roslyn engine. No, in the sense that we will not have to write it as in future time. We already have it. In fact, we've had it for over a year now. We cannot make it available at the moment, due to Microsoft NDA and licensing limitations, but we have it. We've been working with the Roslyn team for over 2 years now, and we were helping them to shape up the Roslyn compiler, and they were helping us leverage of the Roslyn engine within CodeIt.Right. Also now, but that we did not have to rewrite all of CodeIt.Right code base, only the SDK layer. CodeIt.Right is designed in the way that Roslyn fits quite nicely, so we only had to replace the SDK layer that lies between the rules and the. So, and finally, while we are going to be offering a Roslyn-based version of the product, we also will be maintaining our own language engine, because Roslyn will only be available with vNext of Visual Studio, while our products support Visual Studio all the way back to Visual Studio 2005. Alan is asking about enterprise, standard, and personal edition pricing. At a high level, enterprise is designed for teams. If you have a team of 5 or more developers, you should think enterprise. Standard is more for individual developers or smaller teams. Enterprise provides features that allow an architect or lead developer maintain coding guidelines and push them. I don't want to use the word force, but it's essentially push them onto the dev team, and lots of additional reports and enterprise kind of standard, again, for smaller teams, 2-3 developers. Personal licensing allows us to provide great features for those solo developers. You cannot really buy 2 licenses of personal edition, but it provides a middle ground between standard and enterprise. It provides some code metrics that are not part of standard, but does not have team features that Enterprise Edition offers. Jeff is asking, so if it integrates into continuous integration, basically the build will fail for syntax errors. The build will fail based on what you tell CodeIt.Right how you want to fail it. You give CodeIt.Right a specific profile you configure for your continuous integration, and you also define the threshold that at which your build will fail. So it is very flexible. We have a web page that basically provides details. I will be happy to provide you with a link and a little more information about that. And we are 7 minutes over the hour. David, do you have any final comments? I have a couple of more questions here that we'll just follow up over email.
Yeah, there was one question about interfaces and abstract classes. So let's talk about, whoever did that, email me and we can talk about that. But yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and please let us know your comments.
Right. Again, thank you, David. Again, I will mention that we will be posting a link to the recording of this webcast, so everyone who's registered will have an email out to you within the next few days. Information is up on the screen, and at this, we're going to conclude today's webcast. Thank you, David, for presenting, and thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day.